One of the many individuals who were targeted by hitman Jack Smith includes former Congressman Rick Renzi. And I remember Congressman Rick Renzi. All of a sudden, I remember he was charged with all kinds of things by somebody. A conservative Republican from Arizona. Mr. Renzi, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Mark. Thank you.
Well, listen, tell us what happened from the moment something happened and walk us through.
I was congressman for a rural district in Arizona, 50% of the landmass of the state. We were gaining traction, and there was a lot of talk about me running against then Governor Janet Napolitano. And our numbers were ahead of hers in the upcoming election, 2006. Her chief of staff's husband, who was an assistant U.S. attorney in Arizona, brought charges against me, wanted me to plead guilty. I wouldn't. Re-indicted me, asked me to plead guilty. I refused. Finally indicted me on 49 felonies. I fasted
49?
and prayed for 9 days. 49 felonies. I fasted and prayed for 9 days. He offered me 10 months in prison and 1 felony, and I refused. Went to trial. We beat him on all except a handful. The judge allowed us to move forward with appellate briefs involving misconduct. We go to the Ninth Circuit. In Arizona's under the Ninth Circuit, as you know, out in California and San Francisco. And the appellate judge, 3-judge panel, the chief judge on the appellate, sweeps it all away. And as we're preparing for appellate brief to the Supreme Court, the appellate judge, Mark, orders me to prison. Jeez. It turns out the appellate judge was the mentor for a clerk, senior clerk by the name of Jack Smith.
Wow.
We started looking into Jack Smith in 2015. We've tracked him ever since. April 2019, we filed a formal 190-page Inspector General complaint against Jack Smith and his key underling, a guy by the name of David Harbaugh. Now, when you see Jack Smith get up in the courtroom in Miami, or you see Jack Smith speak to the media, the guy who speaks to the attorney in the courtroom is a guy by the name of David Harbaugh. Harbaugh was sanctioned in my case twice, promoted after my case, went to work for James Comey, and helped sweep her destruction of classified material under the rug. That's David Harbaugh. When the heat came on, he retires. Jack Smith comes back from The Hague, is appointed by Merrick Garland. He pulls David Harbaugh out of private practice to put the hit on President Trump. So James Comey's hitman is the guy speaking in the Miami courtroom to Judge Cannon. That's James Comey's revenge. That's the guy who was sanctioned in my case.
What was he sanctioned for?
He wiretapped my attorneys 41 times, covered it up, destroyed exculpatory evidence.
So he gets
Yes,
a warrant to wiretap your attorney talking to you?
He gets a general warrant, a Title III warrant, for 31 days. And during that time, they knowingly wiretapped and listened to and transcribed calls between me and my attorney, all of which was exculpatory evidence. When they realized they did it, they began to destroy the transcripts. And then they lied to the judge when it was discovered. So they were sanctioned.
What did the judge do?
He threw out the Title III wiretap and didn't even throw out one charge. No fruit of the poisonous tree. None.
Now this was Jack Smith's operation?
This was Jack Smith, who was in the courtroom in Tucson, Arizona, and it was his chief underling, David Harbaugh. The two of them are the same pair going after the president.
And his chief underling was a confidant to, you're saying, the former FBI director.
James Comey. And worked, yes, sir, and worked on the Hillary Clinton email cover-up.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
It's
sanctioned
amazing.
Then again, yeah,
Go
sanctioned
ahead.
it then. Forgive me, sanctioned again for providing and knowingly providing false evidence to the jury. The jury, the chief witness in my case, key witness in my case, was offered money using a secret DOJ slush fund when he was going through a divorce, when he was going through bankruptcy. He was offered this carrot, and he changed his testimony. He changed his original FBI 302 field interview and said that I had strong-armed him. And originally he said I hadn't. But when he was offered the money, this little bit of bait, then he changed. So when that came out...
Let me get it straight. So the government offered him money?
Yes, sir. Up to what they thought was... What he thought in court after a post-trial misconduct hearing. Mark, we had 2 misconduct hearings. 7 years pre-trial I fought them. 7 years, sir. So we had a misconduct hearing, pre-trial, and then post-trial. And it came out that he said the money would have been like winning the lottery, like hitting a grand slam, and he expected to be paid because he helped convict me.
Let me get this straight. Under Jack Smith,
yes,
and we'll continue, but I just want to get
who approved this? Who approved it?
So Jack Smith had to know that this wiretap was being used to gather information on you and your lawyer's conversations, correct?
That's correct.
Jack Smith had to know that this key witness that turned state's evidence, quote unquote, against you was offered $25,000 by the prosecution, correct?
Yes, sir. And he knew of the payoff scheme that was offered to the key witness.
Mm-hmm.
All of that led to a 190-page formal Inspector General complaint, which was swept under the rug. And then that led to President Trump pardoning me with a full presidential pardon after 15 congressmen came forward and supported and cited the misconduct, the malfeasance by Jack Smith and David Harbaugh in my case.
Now, this is interesting. Do you think, at least in part, that's why Jack Smith is so hot to trot to put Trump in prison? Because he pardoned you?
I think I'm possibly one of the reasons. I think that the president, being a New York street fighter who's exposed all these sacred cows in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. The most powerful, everyone talks about pharma, big pharma being the most powerful lobbyist organization in Washington. But the National Association of Retired U.S. Attorneys is by far the most powerful organization. And they're the ones who send up their DOJ detailees and congressional staff. They're the ones who send up their detailees and Senate staff, both Republican and Democrat. And they're the ones who kill any kind of sunshine laws, any kind of oversight, any kind of attempt to move the Inspector General out from underneath the Department of Justice and make him answer directly to Congress, the Ethics Committee or the Judiciary Committee. That's all killed by those guys.
Well, we've learned a number of cogent material pieces of information from you. Number one, the number
yes, sir.
2 guy, the right-hand man of Jack Smith, was mentored by James Comey.
That's correct.
Mentored and worked for James Comey and was part of the cover-up operation for Hillary Clinton.
That's absolutely correct.
All right. Number 2, we learned that Jack Smith was a clerk to a judge on the Ninth Circuit, and also, go ahead.
Was part of the attorney-client, attempted to pierce my attorney-client privilege, wiretapped my attorneys 41 times, was sanctioned, and has now done the same thing to the president in trying and being able to pierce his attorney-client privilege.
It seems to me this is pretty typical because they pulled this with Bob McDonnell, the governor of Virginia, too, cutting through attorney-client privilege, and then they leak incessantly, don't they?
One of his favorite dark arts, one of the favorite tactical deceptions he uses is to leak to the media Now, you'd say, okay, that's to taint the jury pool. That's a simple answer. What he's really doing is pressuring the judge on these pretrial motions. He wants to leak and make the president look as bad as he possibly can in order to cover up his abuse of the D.C. grand jury, in order to cover up the lack of candor to the court as it relates to this basis of the crime fraud exception, where he's pierced the attorney-client privilege in the president's case. I mean, this guy, these are American hyenas. These are political animals. They will do at nothing, all costs, whatever it takes to take down political trophies.
Now, he did the same thing, I think, that Judge Cannon in Florida, where it's interesting that all the media are now questioning her capacity to handle a big case like this because of her decision in the special master reviewing documents. You have special masters all the time reviewing documents. Courts don't have the time, and they want to give it to an independent third party. And yet in her case, you had former federal prosecutor. Oh, we've never done that. We've never done that. This is a very unique case. And so she rules the other day, I think yesterday or the day before, we're not going to have the trial start in December, as the prosecution asked. We'll have it in May. There's still a presidential election going on. So by the filing of these charges against President Trump, the way he did and when he did, and the court bowing to this, we now have absolute interference in the election sanctioned by the judge, do we not?
I agree. It's electioneering. I saw, too, how they badmouthed her, tried to taint her reputation. And you see her a little bit now having to move the needle the other way in order to show that, oh, I'm somehow absolutely unbiased. I'm hopeful that the president is going to be able to take the attorney-client privilege fabricated basis where he spoke and communicated to his attorneys in normal questions. And this D.C. judge, Judge Howell, militant feminist, then allowed the crime fraud exception, allowed the piercing of the former president's attorney-client privilege, unheard of. It's even more unheard of than the raid on Mar-a-Lago, Mark. If you think about it, the president of the United States, who has unlimited almost executive privilege, his attorney-client privilege is pierced based upon Jack Smith's presentation of a normal conversation that the president was having with his attorneys in D.C. A D.C. judge does that. When he realizes he has venue trouble, he then relocates the jury to Miami. And what I'm hearing is that all he did was read the D.C. jury transcripts to the new Miami jury. And that's going to be probably questioned pre-trial motion. Mm-hmm. So he stacked the charges.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
You're a federal judge.
No,
you know this attorney. But I'm saying, let's put ourselves in her shoes. You're a federal judge, and you know this attorney-client privilege issue is an issue, a big issue. You're the judge, and you know, according to another lawyer, Rick Renzi, according to another lawyer, they tried to extort him to have his client turn state's evidence if he wanted a federal judgeship, which he's competing for in Washington, D.C., a Superior Court judgeship. And he has filed a complaint with the chief judge, who's also an Obama appointee, who replaced Howe. It's all being done in secret, like all the attorney-client privilege argument was in secret, like it's some kind of star chamber. You're the judge in Florida. Wouldn't you say, wait a minute, even if you're not likely to push it off till after the election, I am not going to go forward here until this issue of possible extortion by your office is resolved, and until this issue of attorney-client privilege is resolved to my satisfaction. How do you go forward with a case when those issues are out there?
I agree. All these pretrial arguments that you've just made, to include the abuse of the grand jury process by convening a grand jury in D.C. and then relocating it to Miami because you realize now you have venue problems. Those three, as well as stacking of charges, which is unethical, All that, I think, needs to go to the Supreme Court, all the way to the Supreme Court, pre-trial motion. Mark, I was 7 years pre-trial fighting the government. 7 years, brother, fighting them. 49 felonies I endured. And we fought them all the way. So I think the president, I think by setting the May date that you spoke of, I think it gets moved. I think hopefully the Supreme Court hears this and intervenes and brings some honest justice to this.
We're here with former Congressman Rick Renzi, who was one of the victims at the hands of Jack Smith. And I just wanted to mention, sir, that you're pointing out David Harbaugh. David Harbaugh did the closing argument in the Bob McDonnell case.
Correct.
In which he went after the governor there. He did the argument, as you point out, 2 days ago in the Trump case in the court, that he was a right hand to James Comey, right-hand man under James Comey, and that, of course, he's very well connected to Jack Smith, who uses him, and you're right, puts him out front as his right-hand man. And it seems to me the same people keep popping up here. Why was Jack Smith selected to be the special counsel out of all the people? Yeah, all the people Merrick Garland could have picked. Apparently, it was the Deputy Attorney General, Lisa Monaco, among others, she's a radical bomb thrower, who recommended him. What do you know?
Merrick Garland, first of all, didn't even know who Jack Smith was. Jack Smith is in The Hague, growing a beard, doing war crime cases that the United States doesn't even recognize the court. So that's 1 year out from retiring to a six-figure job in some liberal D.C. law firm. That's where he's headed. What happens is Eric Holder's hitman is Jack Smith. Jack Smith was a public integrity chief after they washed out and lost on the Ted Stevens case. Holder brings in Smith. So when they're looking for a hitman against the president, they go to Eric Holder, Susan Rice, Barack Obama. That's who Jack Smith's golden boy. He's their golden child. That's the origins of Jack Smith. I've been studying him since 2015 when I was sentenced by the judge that he clerked for in the appellate court. Who is Jack Smith? My attorney's like, who is this guy? And that's what we started to see. We see this bloodline that runs to Eric Holder, Susan Rice, Barack Obama. That's the lead counsel. So you've got Eric Holder's guy talking to the press. You've got James Comey's guy talking to the judge. Those are the two hitmen against the president of the United States, former president.
This is just so grotesque. It really is Soviet-like. And, of course, they have the media in their back pocket because the media hate Trump and they love the Democrat Party and they want the Democrat Party to win. And so he picks Jack Smith because he's advised by the likes of the people you mentioned, as well as a number of the people internal there who are very familiar with Smith, probably familiar with this guy, David Harbaugh, and they know that these are hitmen, correct?
They bring Harbaugh out of retirement. I mean, he's done. Jack Smith is almost in retirement. He's got 1 foot in retirement. He's in The Hague, growing a beard. He's done. And so they bring they put this team back together that are very professional in tactical deception operations, have engaged in prosecutorial misconduct, and a win-at-all-cost team, particularly for political trophies.
Mm-hmm. And you go to prison for 2 years.
Right.
What was that like?
You know, Mark, I'm the father of 12 kids, 7 boys and 5 girls.
Wow.
So it's brutal. And it's a small group of people. You think, you look at some of the innocent projects and they tell you 4 to 6% of the people in prison are innocent. It's a small group of people who really are. But those that are innocent, that are in prison, the number one reason that innocent people are in prison is because prosecutorial misconduct, prosecutorial malfeasance. So I'm in prison. I'm in there 2 weeks. I sit in the wrong chair during a Saturday football game. I get clocked in the back of the head. Fight breaks out. Break my hand. I'm bit on the side. I have a human bite that's infected, but you can't tell anybody. Otherwise, they put you in the hole. I got a good guy in there who treated me with lime juice. I get through the infection, which lasted, 4 or 5 months. And then my kids, they come see their father, who's fought the government 7 years pre-trial. And the only thing I can tell them is, look, and this is 15 years ago when the FBI had their own television stove still. The FBI was golden. Efren Zimbalist Jr. and the FBI, for those listeners who are maybe not old enough to remember. These guys, you couldn't say the FBI was corrupt. It was impossible. And I'm trying to, explain my innocence. Look, these guys are corrupt. Wiretapped my attorneys. Knowingly sponsored false testimony to the jury. Offered a witness payoff scheme. This guy Jack Smith is corrupt. This guy David Harbaugh, they've been sanctioned. Yeah. Get in your bunk and shut up.
Now, he went after Menendez in New Jersey. And the jury said no, he didn't prove his case. And in fact, the jury said he took a bribery statute and he broadened it, and they said no. The jury said no. In the John Edwards case, 6 felonies, which were preposterous, over his girlfriend and the out of wedlock baby, putting them up in an apartment and getting donors to help support that. And he takes the Federal Election Campaign Act, stretches that the way Alvin Bragg has, and says that's in order to build a positive image. The jury said no, 6 charges. They deadlocked on 5. And then one juror said it was one juror who deadlocked. All of us said this is ridiculous. So the public integrity section decides not to go for it anymore. You bring up the IRS. It's never brought up. The Tea Party. He's the one that was behind Lois Lerner and the rest and gave the okay to go forward, targeting all these Tea Party groups and basically crippling many of them as well. He's got his hands in a lot of crap, doesn't he?
He does. I mean, without even looking at what he did in my case, he took the Presidential Records Act that you've been keen to point out, which is a library law. It's a civil law. He went to a militant feminist judge in Washington, D.C., Judge Howell, and got her to issue a search warrant raid on Mar-a-Lago, a criminal search warrant, using a library law. That in itself, in a venue that she shouldn't even be ruling in. And so that in itself shows how. No,
I think in that case he got a master down in Florida to do it. And by the way, no master should be handling a case like that. It ought to be a full-fledged judge, don't you think?
When she was true, you're right. When she receives the document, Judge Howell receives the attorney-client privilege communication in the document.
Yep.
She turns it over to Jack Smith before President Trump has a chance to even appeal. Mm-hmm. And then she steps down as chief judge.
You know, you make a great point there. She issued that in secret, the opinion, and left 5 minutes later, retired. She issues it and retires. Turns it over to another Obama judge. Go ahead.
And then turns the documents over to, I agree with you completely. We're talking in agreement here. Turns the documents, the communication, the attorney-client privilege communications, over to Jack Smith before the president can appeal. That in itself has got to go on to the Supreme Court and see if that's not abuse of power.
So I just want to be clear. I want to get these connections straight. Correct me if I'm wrong. David Harbaugh was brought out of retirement. He's the right-hand man to Jack Smith over the years, and he's the right-hand man now. And he was a confidant, a flunky to James Comey, correct?
That's absolutely correct.
And he was in the courtroom 2 days ago on behalf of Smith. He's the guy that goes in and litigates most of this stuff. And there's another guy by the name of Bart, by the way. He's head of counterintelligence. And this is the guy has a complaint filed against him by the attorney for President Trump's co-defendant. Basically, he's saying, this guy extorted me. This guy said if I could get my guy to turn on Trump, that the likelihood of me getting a federal judgeship is going to be improved. Now, that is, if true, extortion, flat out. So we have that situation. Yeah. Right. So we have that situation. So what you're basically saying here is these guys cut corners. They redefine the law. They're one of the key things they do is to try and figure out how to get behind attorney-client privilege, which means when you sit down with your lawyer and you spill your guts to the lawyer, And you expect that to be secret. So you have due process rights, proper representation under the Constitution. So your Fifth Amendment's not violated. And then he goes in and goes with the crime fraud exception. We have a right to it. And he finds the right judge, and the judge says, you're right. Then she retires. And in your case, they're wiretapping you and your lawyer. That's unbelievable.
Correct.
And these are the same people.
It's the tyrannical abuse of power. It is dark arts. It's prosecutorial malfeasance. And who's going to hold them accountable? There's no accountability. John Durham goes up on the Hill and testifies before Chairman Jordan's committee. He doesn't really upset the apple cart, but the only message he constantly puts through is no accountability, no accountability. Unless we move the Inspector General out from underneath the Department of Justice and direct line item fund them from Congress, where the Inspector General has to answer to Congress on a quarterly basis, naming names of FBI agents, U.S. attorneys, assistant U.S. attorneys who've engaged in malfeasance, misconduct, corruption, we will never get control of this Justice Department. And without the Justice Department, we lose the Republic.
You're 100% right. Well, former Congressman Rick Renzi, I want to thank you for your courage, for reaching out to us. I'm very glad you came on the program and explained so much of this to the American people, sir.
My honor, Mark.
All right. Take care of yourself and those 12 kids.